And already a few companies have already set up shop in South Sudan. We know the KCB and the likes of Equity Bank also already have presence and actually performing quite well from a profit perspective there. And it seems that a lot of other companies want to follow suit. Is it the gold mine that we expect?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there are very huge opportunities in that region, bearing in mind that this is a very virgin market. Just 2 years ago when, it turned into a new estate, we've seen so many companies flocking in that region, particularly from its neighbors, East Africa. Well, we've seen a huge number of companies showing interest to invest in that particular area, and particularly in several sectors. Key of them being the infrastructure sector, where we've seen two of the main cement companies, namely East African Portland and Athi River, planning to go and set base there. Well, this is just to show that the huge infrastructure challenge that is there. Well, this is a country where we are seeing that has no single railway network at all. And in fact, even the roadway network that is there, I mean, it's less than 100 kilometers of it is tarmacked. So in that space, we've seen there are huge opportunities there. Well, of course, there are so many opportunities in other sectors, namely there's mining, there's agriculture, I mean, that remains to be exploited. I see an opportunity even in the telecom side. There are opportunities on the hospitality side. I mean, an average business traveler going to Juba, sometimes we'll have to, just to stay in a tent. Well, so I see an opportunity, huge opportunities for some of the Kenyan companies flocking there. And I guess this is the main reason why most companies are going there. Well, of course, there are other factors to do with, there are issues that posed challenges, particularly the last 2 years, but right now they've been phased out, and one of them being the issues to do with business licensing. We've seen that since last year, July, the government, Sudan, really streamlining some of the operations to do with taxes, employment considerations, and I think some of these actually played a big part to incentivize or to kind of encourage businesses from Kenya to go into that region.
Rufus, I mean, let's just take a step back because we know cooperative bank. So let's just touch on the banking sector, because all the sectors you mentioned basically includes everything possible that, of course, Sudan could perhaps offer those businesses. But let's touch on the banking sector, because cooperative bank plans to open up its first branch there. We know that CFC Stanbic has also been very interested and been looking at leveraging off a lot of their customers, which like the UN, for example, and other international organizations. It seems that almost that the banking sector is going to leverage off the fact that we're starting to see demand in other areas. Is there going to be significant growth? And I mean, how's the competitive environment going to play out?
Well, as you mentioned, it's quite true. Most of the banking firms, in fact, almost all of them have in one way or another showed interest in investing in that area. But what I've noticed personally is some of the players, particularly the big players, the likes of KCB and CFC and Equity, have gone there first. And I think they went there like about 1.5 years ago, while the rest of the pack remaining behind. I guess it was just part of the strategy to see what's going to happen to those two, and before we come in. So I mean, the results that we saw in 2010. And some of the year of 2011 have shown good results for KCB and Equity that have invested in that region, and I think that was just one of the main pointer that was just to push some of these companies now to invest into that region.
Well, Rufus,
already we've seen CFC.
What's interesting also to note is when you look at the consumer side of things, we know that Uchumi supermarkets at Nakumatt are also planning to enter Sudan. You mentioned the licensing issue and how open is Sudan for international companies or foreign companies, so to speak, despite the fact that it is, of course, Kenya, coming into the market. Are we not seeing the government perhaps being slightly averse to this, that they'd want to have homegrown entities and ensure that businesses homegrown businesses could flourish within that space?
Well, first of all, you have to appreciate the challenges that are there. I mean, this is a country with about 8 to 10 million people who are largely unemployed. most of them are uneducated, and there's a whole challenge there with low consumption, low consumption rate, particularly the uptake of retail products. Well, the likes of Uchumi showing interest in that particular area, I think it's because there's a huge opportunity there. Currently, there's no existing retailer who's doing like an mass market kind of investing in that region. And some of the players that are there, just the mom and pop shops, the kiosks, as we know, as we call them here in Kenya. So I think for Uchumi, it's a right step. And particularly, the second reason could be to fend off competition that is facing locally, and as a way of trying to diversify its revenue. And I think it's a good step for it to go into that area. Yeah. But of course, I think there are challenges that are there, particularly in terms of consumption, and it has to do with the fact that with the history of that country that for the last 2 decades has been in war. And I think it will take time before we start seeing, the likes of Uchumi or the other bigger players like Nakumat and the likes coming into that market.
Can we just touch on the infrastructure space? You mentioned that of course, being one of the interesting spaces because of the rail side of things. But it's also interesting to note that with regards to the row that we've seen when it comes to the transit fees for oil, there could be an opportunity there. On the other end, you see oil as being the dominant factor that drives growth in that country. Is this just not much of a big risk factor for those entering this country?
Well, of course, as you mentioned, it's quite a high risk, but well, it's an opportunity, and if they play the cards right, I think they're set to get huge returns. Well, in the infrastructure space, well, I see there's a huge opportunity there. There's a huge opportunity particularly with the rail, with the power. Actually, mentioning power, there's such a huge deficit power supply in that country. When you look at the road networks and all that, to me it's a challenge, yes, but it offers huge opportunities for cement companies like East African Portland, the likes of the river mining that are have planned to set bases there, and I think going forward we as the country that is near to them and have the necessary muscle and the money to invest, we can actually come in and set up the infrastructure right. Yeah. Mentioning oil and well the energy sector as a whole. Well, just 2 months, about a few weeks ago, the Kenyan country, Kenya and Ethiopia and Southern Sudan governments came together to launch a project they call LAPSET. Well, this is to link the region to ease the oil supply situation, in the sense that they have cut the land that was traveled by oil, because initially the oil was to travel from Juba all the way up to Port Sudan in the northern side of the former Sudan. And right now, with the project that we know, it's called the LAPSET project, it's going to cut that land traveled by almost 1,700 kilometers. So I think that project is going to really help Southern Sudanese, to fix the infrastructure and also to get their revenues right in terms of oil revenue.
Rufus, let's just also touch on who's going to fund a lot of the infrastructure projects, because it's easy to say that we'll see a lot of the construction companies or even cement companies be interested in Sudan, but we also need to see the foreign direct investment. We know a lot of donor aid is coming through. Briefly, tell us what you think on that point.
Well, of course. In fact, one of the reasons why some of these companies are going there, it's because of the donor money that is coming into the country, but most particularly from the UK, that has been a supporter of that country. Well, of course, there's that bit, and then there's also money coming in from the NGO space and some of the UN agencies. Well, some of this money is going to, is going to actually to be deployed into the infrastructure, and some of these companies actually, it's a right step for them to go there and take advantage of that money flowing in and to set up the infrastructure in that country.
Fantastic, Rufus. We have to leave it there.
So yes, you're right.
Thank you so much. We have to leave it there. So thank you so much, and I hope you have a great weekend. That was Rufus Mwanyasi, investment analyst at Tsavo Securities.